I'll admit, it's been a long time since I've driven an underpowered 1990s family car, but when Ben asked me to review his 26-year-old Infiniti G20t, a car I frankly had never heard of, I was happy to oblige. Thanks to the channel's recent growth, I've been able to experience a lot of high-performance machines, some simply too powerful to fully enjoy on the public road. When I started the channel several years ago, I was mostly reviewing humble daily drivers that were frankly easy to drive flat out, and I loved every bit of it. There's something special about hearing an owner's story of how they bought their car for a few grand and picked up a wrench to make it their own. And it's even more satisfying being given the go-ahead to rip through the gears, foot to the floor, never needing to worry about license revoking speeds. So here we go again. Complete with 140 horsepower, bright red wheels, and a history competing in 90s Japanese touring car races, this little front-drive sedan might just be the return to my roots that I didn't actually know I needed.
Welcome to a video. This is a review of a car I've honestly never even heard of until Ben here reached out to me. This is his 95 Nissan, well, I guess technically it's an Infiniti G20t, also known as a Nissan Primera in Japan and Europe. So very unassuming little car. It looks like, you know, very almost related to like an old school Sentra or something. So tell me about this car. What drew this to you, and what are kind of the specs on paper?
What drew me to this car was originally the SR motor, and just, you know, how smooth it is and how usable it is and how gas friendly it is also. I mean, I can get 380 miles to a full tank.
Wow.
And the other thing too was that this was Nissan's only design with a multi-link suspension in the front. There's the only time they've ever done it. Then after this model, they started going to a torsion beam in the rear and McPherson in the front. So
the G35, right?
Right, and the G, and well, actually just even in the newer G20 and the
okay.
P11.
Okay.
So the P10 is very unique in that aspect that it comes with multi-link front.
Okay. It kind of reminds me. I mean, we talked about this earlier when I first hopped in. It reminded me of my '99 Honda Civic Si EM1.
Correct.
In kind of the way like the interior feels, this kind of cheap leather and like the really high seating position. But also it shares some similarity in that like that was the last generation Civic Si to have like a full double wishbones all around.
Correct.
And it just seems like in general a lot of these economy Japanese sort of performance cars in the late 90s and mid and late 90s, that is generally considered by a lot of enthusiasts like the heyday for like fun, affordable, reliable, easy to work on, and just really just great handling cars. And I suspect we're gonna have something similar today when we start pushing this car. The car's basically bone stock, right?
Pretty much bone stock except for TNS Tex and KYB XLG.
Okay, so just some suspension.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we're running the Firehawk Indy 500s, a personal
Correct.
favorite street tire of mine. Yeah, so we're talking 140 horsepower, 130 foot-pounds of torque. Red line at $7.5 grand. Probably no reason to rev it out that far.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy for it, but it kind of dies down a little bit. So.
And this thing weighs, you said, because it's the Infiniti model with like more sound deadening and leather and what have you, it's a little over 2,800
About
pounds.
2,800 pounds, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
but it does have a front Torsen LSD, right?
Yes, viscous LSD.
Oh, viscous LSD.
Viscous LSD in the front, so that will help out in the corners here.
Okay. Extremely light clutch shifter.
So much power.
So much power. This car just screams 90s JDM. It's great. So, a little history lesson for potential viewers, and I'm sure you can chime into this. In Nissan Primera form, this car actually was a winner race car in the BTCC series.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like that cool little factoid, I guess, that like you don't really know. Like you would never know that looking at this car. Even
Right.
if you're a car enthusiast, if you don't know what the Nissan Primera is, you would never know that this thing was like dominating the the touring car championship
from
back
the
in the 90s.
early to mid 90s. Even in the late 90s when they introduced the P11 model, it was still winning championships, and that was really impressive. Albeit they completely swapped the suspension to something else, but still
almost unrecognizable from this car. But it's still cool to have that connection and that heritage, right?
And that's one thing I always like to joke about with people when they get in this car.
Yeah.
I always tell them, do you guys know there's no cup holders? It's a real race car.
It's a real race car. That's so funny.
Yeah, you can just pound that gas.
Just pound it.
Yeah,
It's great.
Doesn't do anything. Yeah, with this car I like to short shift it quite often.
Okay.
Coming down the straightaway like this, I'll like short shift it to third just so I can heel toe into a second.
Right. That's half the fun, right?
Yeah.
So you were saying this thing has the front multi-lane suspension. So help me understand, because I'm no suspension geometry expert.
Okay.
How is that different than a double wishbone?
A double wishbone, if you think about it, it's two connectors like this.
Yeah,
right?
control arms.
Yeah, two control arms that look identically the same. So when you talk about the multi-link, the sway bar and the arms and everything are all connected together.
Okay.
Multi-linking it.
Okay.
It's very reminiscent of the 300ZX rear end.
Okay.
That's what it's just kind of flipped to the front of this car, and that's kind of like the best way to describe it.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, but I like this car a lot. I think the engine is probably in some ways it's the most disappointing part of the car because it doesn't make that much power. It has a very narrow power band.
Right.
But at the same time it's also kind of fun because of that. You just put a very low powered economy car engine in a really fun chassis with a manual trans and an LSD. That's kind of all it really takes to make a car fun to drive. But that being said, if this car had an extra 40 horsepower and actually revved out to let's say 8, that would be perfect.
Yeah.
Just ideal.
Yeah. The meat and potatoes for me is always mid 90s to early 2000 cars. That's what I tend to buy all the time.
Yeah.
I love newer cars, but I just can't fathom spending 40 grand on a Honda Accord.
Yeah.
It just seems a little absurd.
It is a little absurd. If you're trying to maximize fun, then older cars are they're just the way to go.
Yeah.
There's a reason why my daily driver's from 05. I mean, that's considered new for me, right?
Yeah.
And I've owned a 30-year-old car for the past 6 years now. So
You're the NSX.
The NSX, yeah.
The reason why this car didn't make it very popular was because everybody thought it was a Sentra that just had an Infiniti badge on it,
Yeah.
and nobody knew what it really was.
yeah, it's kind of hard to market. The whole point of Nissan was to market sort of target a more upscale audience in the United States. But when you're still front-wheel drive and you're still 4-cylinder, it's kind of hard to justify for American buyers. That's why I think the G35 did so well here, because now you're talking rear-wheel drive 6-cylinder. Thanks again, Ben, for letting me drive your G20t Infiniti, aka Nissan Primera, and everywhere else. I love driving these older, slower, sort of kind of unknown sort of sleeper cars.
So the takeaway here is actually one that I used to embrace, but might have forgotten over the years. Quantity of performance doesn't always equate to fun. It's the way in which a car achieves its performance and the level of driver engagement that has time and again brought that big stupid grin to my face. Ben's G20T represents this point perfectly. It might have no chance of winning a stoplight race against, well, anything really, but in my book, its miles per gallon rating is off the charts.